From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
A listener by the name of Anton sent us this. I know you guys have tread carefully when covering news like this. I looked into this a few months ago, and you can find quite a few reputable news outlets covering this bizarre and wildly unethical story, although it has had nowhere near as much exposure as it deserves. Sorry to bring this to your attention. Thanks, Anton. We accept your apology, but I would love to get your take. And he sends us a link to an article with the headline, Berlin authorities place children with pedophiles for 30 years. Take a second to breathe that one in. Placed children with pedophiles for 30 years. Now, you might be asking yourself, was this an oversight? They just weren't aware of their records, their sex offender record, and they accidentally placed children with pedophiles for 30 years? No, it was in fact a program called the Kindler Project in West Berlin, where the government routinely placed homeless children with pedophile men because of a concept that was spearheaded by this one individual that posited that pedophile men would make ideal foster parents. A study found that this practice went on for many decades. So this all goes back to a gentleman by the name of Helmut Kindler, who in the 1970s conducted psychological experiments. He was a psychology professor. He put forth this idea that homeless children ought to be placed with pedophile men because they would make for a particularly loving foster parents. And then an investigation by the University of Hildesheim found that authorities in Berlin not only looked the other way, but actually condoned this practice for around 30 years. The idea of sexual contact between foster parents and children was essentially approved, was essentially thought of as not that big a deal. Possibly even like a positive thing, like some sort of form of nurturing. Berlin's child welfare offices and governing senate, according to this article in DW and multiple corroborating articles, and again, that research from Hildesheim University, they turned a blind eye or even actually approved of these placements. Now, actually only a few years ago, two of the victims of this program have come forward to tell their story, and then the researchers are beginning to dig back through their archives to, fill in the gaps and conduct new interviews. What they found was a, quote, network across educational institutes, the State Youth Welfare Office, and the Berlin Senate in which pedophilia was accepted, supported, and even defended.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
Yeah, and there are going to be there are going to be people in the crowd who want to know a specific age. So I believe a lot of these were disadvantaged youths, right. Anywhere from 13 to 15 years old.
Exactly right. Just so.
Some who have been forced into sex trafficking as a means of survival. This has been reported. Anton, you might find this interesting. Irish Times did a great piece on this back in 2016. It's weird, though, because this was not something I think many people outside Western Europe are aware of. And you have to wonder, is this like, how Unit 731 in the Pacific Theater of World War II, how that was, the research data they gathered there was useless. They were just torturing people and calling it research. So you have to wonder whether Helmut Kindler believed in these theories or whether it was some sort of rationalization for turning these very vulnerable children over to, as you said, Noel, known child abusers, at least one who had a criminal record for this. And I think do we know the extent of the program? Do we know how many children we're talking about over this multi-decade span?
It's something that I think would actually be worth a deeper dive, because I really only read the handful of articles that that were cross-referenced in this DW article. But it almost has the appearance of, like, to what I think you were kind of getting at, Ben, is it almost feels like so many of the foster fathers were high-profile academics from highly respected institutions like the Max Planck Institute or Berlin's Free University, and also the Odenwald School in Hesse, West Germany. That was actually in and of itself at the center of a huge pedophilia scandal in the not too distant past. This reminds me, to a degree, it's not exactly the same, of the piece that you covered on a recent either Strange News or Listen to Mail episode about Oxfam and some of their work in Haiti, essentially recruiting, people in absolute need as sex workers. This I would need to see more research in this and dig deeper into the study that was done by the university. But because of the high profile academics, it almost seems like kind of like a weird kind of pedophile ring for the elite. At least it has that feel. I'm not making accusations here. I'm just saying, it has sort of like an organizational quality to it that makes me think perhaps these were being vetted, with
from what
support.
From what it seems now, the big questions are, first off, Kentler cannot be asked about this, Anton. He passed away in 2008. Being the subject of controversy, but not the subject of criminal investigation, as far as we know. We also don't know, at least the official word from the investigators in the later studies, is that we don't know to what extent the German government turned a blind eye to this or tacitly agreed. We don't know to what extent they were aware. At least the authorities, people in supervisory positions. But it definitely happened. It's not a conspiracy theory. It was some sort of conspiracy. I am immensely fortunate that I wasn't familiar with Helmut Kentler's work before this story broke. Because this story did a couple things. This story kind of broke and then rebroke, keeping up with the ongoing investigation. I think I speak for our whole crew when we say our hearts go out to the survivors of this horrific practice, many of whom are still alive. The 70s weren't too long ago. So
yeah, you'll have to forgive me over here. I'm the disgust I think that we're all feeling. I'm just feeling it very strongly right now at this kind of the condoning of this from a highly educated person. That, how do they describe him? In a leading position. This guy, Helmut Kentler, was in a leading position at Berlin Center for Educational Research at the time in the 70s. That this person would then put people, with folks, and again, we're talking about thousands of kids, because I haven't seen a lot of the numbers, but I did see in the Irish Times article that around 1970 or in the 70s, when this was occurring, there were thousands of children who were placed throughout this program. And they're talking about people that they were placed with. Several, it says here, were high-profile academics, high-ranking members of the Max Planck Institute, Berlin's Free University, and this place called the Odenwald School, which is a whole story of its own.
This also occurs in the context of a lot of these predators were using the sexual revolution as kind of a cover for their own rationalizations. And the public discourse about this specific genre of abuse was held in a disturbingly transparent way, with people actively lobbying for things like the decriminalization of adults and children. And, of course, the rationalization was that this would be somehow consensual. But as we have proven in previous episodes, and as science has borne out, informed consent from a child is impossible. You know what I mean? Like these people were lying, and they knew they were lying. At this point, from what I understand, that study in June 2020 that got released, Noel, I believe that they're going to at least offer financial compensation to the survivors. Is that correct?
Yes, they are looking to pay some, I guess, damages, for lack of, I guess that's the right term, but also just to kind of get to the bottom of it. And the government is now kind of on board. There's no more turning a blind eye, and they're like, wanting to, this is actually like, I mean, not only is this a human rights, violation, absolute, bungle, it's really a horrible PR look, that like, oh, the government is that laissez-faire that they condone pedophilia. I think any of us would agree that is a bridge too far.
Yeah, this one just makes me angry.
In the same way that the Oxfam story made us all angry, because it's, again, it's a situation where you're supposed to be helping these underprivileged children who need support, and they're literally being thrown to the wolves. It's disgusting.
And unfortunately, while every group like this, every crime ring of this sort has its own distinct characteristics, they are unfortunately not unique. It is. We've talked about this before. I can't remember whether on or off the air, but we do take pains to avoid being exploitative or sensationalistic or alarmist about this stuff, because it does not help the survivors of these abhorrent acts, With that being said, if you have experienced this network, or if you live in Germany and can give us some insight on this, we would love to hear from you. Or if you have experienced a network like this in some other part of the world. But thank goodness there are ethical and conscientious investigators on the case in Germany. And, I'm just walking through just the bar napkin math here. I guess the odds are kind of against a lot of them being alive right now, because we said the original guy passed away in 2008. So, because these people would have been adults, right? They're highly placed academics. They would have been adults in the 70s, 60s, and so on.
Yeah, it's true. And, I think this is absolutely important to bring up now so people can start doing their own research. But I would love to dig in. Love is a strong word here, but the research being conducted ongoingly by the University of Hildesheim to see, what they found and maybe a little bit more detail around the actual predators in the story.